Welcome to our last webinar of 2020. Today's webinar is about mining, its importance for the economy, and how important it is to develop a sustainable mining for the environment, for our families, and for our future. In today's webinar, it's a pleasure to have two extraordinary panelists and an extraordinary moderator. Allow me to do an introduction briefly about them. Our first panelist, we have the pleasure to have Honorable Senator Rosa Galvez. She was born in Peru, graduated from Universidad Nacional de Ingeniería in Peru. Then she moved to Canada and followed her master and PhD in environmental engineering. It's always a pleasure to listen to many fascinating experiences she has enjoyed when she was doing research all over the world. Many thanks, Rosa, for being here. Our second panelist, we have the pleasure to have Theben. He is currently Managing Principal, Mining Sector Lead of SLR Consulting. He is studying in Germany at Aachen University and Queen's University here in Canada. He enjoyed more than 20 years providing engineering and environmental services in the mining industry. SLR is a global leader in environmental and advisory solutions. They help their clients to achieve their sustainability goals. SLR is one of our key members of the Peruvian-Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Stefan, thank you so much for being here today. And now as our moderator, we have the pleasure to have Corp Breede. He is the founder and lead executive officer at Newton Minerals. Newton Minerals is the world's first non-for-profit sustainable mineral development agency. In addition to that, Kurt is the current chair of the CIM, the Canadian Institute of Mining, Metallurgy and Petroleum, in the Toronto chapter. Rosa, Stephen, Kurt, welcome and many thanks for being here. Without further ado, I will pass the mic to Kurt.
Thank you, Arturo, for that kind and warm welcome, and welcome, Stefan and Rosa. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And also welcome, of course, to all of our attendees today. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to join us. And bienvenido. That's the extent of my Spanish. That's all you will hear from me. So I thought we should start today's discussion mostly with an observation. And I think both of our panelists and all of our attendees will probably agree that the topic of sustainability really seems to have risen to some prominence in most discussions around mining these days. I think everyone would agree with that. It's funny because the term CSR, which is short for corporate social responsibility, that seems to have taken a back seat to the newer term ESG, which is short for environmental, social, and corporate governance. Both of those terms seem to have quite broad meanings. So I guess my first question to both of our panelists this morning is, what does sustainability mean to you in the context of mining, and why do you think it's so prominent today? Maybe Rosa, I'll have you start first.
Yes, sure. Thank you very much. And bienvenidos a esta discusión sobre la durabilidad en minería. Mining is essential to our economy and our life, and so therefore it will continue to be a prominent activity in our economy, social life, and even health. Also, mining, unfortunately, has a big impact because of its approach of physical approach, mechanical approach of changing the landscape. It overlaps with the places where, for example, indigenous people live, or where here in Quebec we have even cities very close to mines. Now, again, with the changing to renewable energy, new metals are going to be needed. We know already about lithium, but there is also other earth rare metals that are going to be looked at. And the last point that I want to make is that climate change is affecting already even the mining activities. You know, there's been so many accidents with respect to the dams that contains the residues or even the materials themselves. And they happen in Brazil, it happened here in Canada, so therefore it is important that we solve these issues, and a sustainable approach is a solution or a way to go forward on this.
That's a good point about the different communities that you're working with, whether it's in Quebec or other provinces. Stefan, from your point of view as a consultant, you know, what does sustainability mean to you?
Yeah, thank you, Kurt, and thank you again for the opportunity to speak to this group. I think it means being a good neighbor. Do right by your neighbors and your community, and have an open and transparent dialogue. It also means protecting the environment. You know, do progressive reclamation, work on long-term closure planning right from the outset. And sustainability and ESG now in the mining industry really has widened significantly in recent years, but it's nothing new to the industry, even if the term is a little bit more recent. Conducting operations in a way that is mindful of communities contributes to a company's credibility in the marketplace and towards lenders, and that's why that is gaining some momentum now. Climate and environment are on everyone's mind now. It used to be sort of a niche group that cared about those things, but that's on everybody's mind, and that's now showing that there's a push in the mining sector to protect the environment more and to protect the climate. And lenders are now paying a lot of attention to ESG. They want to make sure that they invest in a well-run business that makes a positive contribution to society.
It's funny because I get the sense that historically the burden of sustainability has fallen squarely on the shoulders of the mining industry, but I get the sense these days that organizations further up the supply chain are starting to step up to bear some of that burden. Would you agree with that?
I would, for sure. It's tough for just a mining operation to be carbon neutral, for example, right? It needs the whole supply chain to work together and work on sourcing materials, on using resources in an integrated fashion, and you need to go up and down the supply chain, if you will, to really have maximize the contribution of mining operations.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the principles of sustainability are global, but I suppose the application of or how it's applied in different parts of the world can differ. I know both of you, Rosa and Stefan, are quite well traveled. Rosa, from your perspective, is the approach to sustainability the same, or does it differ from one jurisdiction to another?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. Actually, no. It depends on the needs, and it depends also of the level of the development of the technology, the development of the government structure, and the legal framework that it's operating in the place where we are. So, for example, Canadian mines operate a lot in overseas. 58% of operations of Canadian mine, it's held in Latin America, starting by Brazil, Mexico, Peru, Dominican Republic, Argentina, Chile. So each of these countries have different legal frameworks, and of course we want that the Canadian mines operate at the same level, at the same standards that are held here in Canada.
Are you aware of any global or international standards that some companies or companies as a whole are adhering to?
Well, one concrete example is with respect to the dams. So as I mentioned before, there are around the world major accidents. The one in Brazil recently, uncover the situation that climate change is impacting at the level of erosion, at the level of precipitation, raining, and this is impacting the structure of these dams. So there was an international effort to change the way these dams are designed, and so stricter standards are becoming, and that makes part of making companies more responsible, not only for the present but also in the future, to take in considerations the climate change impacts that that the activities are having in mining.
Right. Well, you mentioned dams, and of course, the unfortunate part of working in the industry is that generally mining doesn't hit the headlines unless it's something bad. And of course, tailings is unfortunately quite prominent in the news, with the last one being in Brazil. No, I agree. How about yourself, Stephen? What are some of the examples of some of the challenges you see mining companies facing today?
You know what, tailings is a really good example. That everybody's worried about tailings at the moment, and the industry is really focusing on driving towards a more credibility in with regards to tailings management, and it really goes to show that the basics need to be done right. We can talk about climate change and carbon neutral, but you have to start at making sure you do your tailings management right. It starts with site selection. It starts with looking at the proper tailings management methods. And I think what we'll see is more inclusion of stakeholders and more transparency about risk and mitigation going forward. The governance around tailings and how we deal with our risk close to communities has to be improved, and the industry is making really big strides towards that. And the global tailings review is one of these pieces, and the industry is paying a lot of attention to them. I think water is always a concern, and it always will be a concern. Industry knows how to deal with it, but stakeholders are always worried. Is there too much water, not enough water? Will the water be polluted? So one thing that industry is doing more and more is again be very open and transparent about the way water is being managed, and include the communities in the monitoring. That really helps. Be part of it. Help understand where you analyze, why you analyze, and be transparent about the results. And then I think another thing that will be is developing more and more is measuring social license. Social license has always been a bit of a fuzzy term, and everybody thinks if I talk to the communities twice, I'm sure they all want the mine. That's not the case. There's now ways to measure social license, and there's mitigations and systems to make sure you stay on top of it and maintain a social license. And that is something that I think will become more and more prominent as sort of the social relationships move out of the shadow of this is just talk and gossip to a measurable metric in the mine's performance.
I would like to add something. I completely concur with Stephen, and I just would like to add something about the tailings and the residues. The mining technology of extraction has evolved. If we talk about metals, there is a lot of evolution in the metallurgic and extraction of the metals, but also when we talk about petroleum or, for example, the oil sands, with the time we have improved. We use less and less water. But still, there are a lot of residues. And one of, for example, of my research projects was on biolixiviation, because there are still some residues, metals in what we call the esterals and what we call the residues. And so we have to approach it from circularity, integrate circularity in the whole life cycle of the mining. So looking in ways of recycling materials, extracting much more the metals, or sometimes at the beginning we look just for one single metal, and then the ore has many others that can be looked at it. And so we are looking at giving value to the residues. And so that is important. And with respect to social acceptability or social license is that I think that what the indigenous people are looking for is to becoming partners, and also to care about at the end of the cycle. You know, once the exploitation has taken place, what happened with that land? What happened with the economic activities of the community? So they are looking at sustainability, durability, and be able to recuperate those lands that the landscape was changed and be remediated. And there is a lot now on reforestation, and and then it's associated with carbon capture by reforestation. So all of this, again, it becomes like a circle. So I just wanted to introduce the circularity approach on this.
Well, I like that analogy, and it reminds me of an anecdote, Stefan, that you had mentioned in our brief chat earlier. The subject of tree frogs came up, and I wondered if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, we started talking about this webinar had sort of an ecology approach tagline to it, and it made me think of a story in the late 1960s in Tanzania commissioned a large hydro dam. Coincidentally, Tanzania is doing the same thing now. They're planning a really big hydro dam again that has a lot of controversy. A few weeks later, a local amphibian expert was hired to look at the status of a very unique frog that actually lived in the mist on the walls around the waterfall, and the waterfall was downstream of the dam. So he went and looked, and by the time he got there, they were all extinct. Right. So when he and that was a species that only lived in this area. So that's sort of the kind of events that have brought ecological thinking into the forefront, and EAs and sustainability, right? Think about the effects of what you do before you do it, and the mitigation, because if you try to fix things afterwards, it doesn't work. That's how EA and sustainability was involved into mining. First, air quality, water quality, then the ecological piece, and now we're way more down on the social sustainability, stakeholder side. These things have evolved over time as integrated planning becomes more and more sophisticated and integrated.
So you've obviously seen that, like you call it, the evolution of how companies interact with, and that's the other thing I was going to point out is, you use the term stakeholder versus shareholder, and I think that's something else that I've recognized as the importance of everyone's seat at the table. But I'm just curious, what have you seen in terms of how differently companies are conducting themselves on this whole license to operate?
Oh, is this a question to me or to both of us?
I guess yeah, I'll start with you, Stefan.
I think the way companies now plan mines has really changed in the last 20 years. That's my sort of horizon I've been involved. Mm-hmm. And it's gotten a lot more from, let's meet twice with the communities and just tell them we're there and give everybody a nice little pencil, and then we will be partners. That's no longer happening, right? There's relationships. There's the company is there from the beginning to talk to the communities, understand what the issues are. Consultation has become an integrative and iterative process, and you stay there in the long term. Closure planning is discussed way early. We are just in the process of helping build a mine in Ontario, and I remember we did consultation on closure 5 years ago before construction started. And that is important, right? And that's how you get buy-in from the communities. Hey, how can we develop this land afterwards to make sure that we still enjoy the land and feel comfortable that our future generations will have a place to live. Mm-hmm. Those things have really changed. And like I said, now there's actually mechanisms to try to measure social license, because it's very hard to say, right? If you are involved in consultation and your boss says, how is everything going? Oh, it's going great. I had a great meeting. Well, that does not mean that there isn't a lot of people who are upset or don't know. So finding mechanisms to really understand where you sit with your relationships with all stakeholders is very important, and that is being driven more and more.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that sort of leads into the next question I had for you, Rosa, is based on what Stefan's described. What role do you think governments have played or should play to support that kind of dialogue, or even just sustainability in general?
Yes. So I think that finally, we are coming to the not only the perception, but also the reality catches up with us that the infinite growth in a planet with finite resources doesn't work. So we have to have a more sustainable approach. And so now that we are aware of that, now that we know that we have disturbed the atmosphere and that we have created a lot of waste and we have created danger for people, for us, for our health, for our safety, now is how do we change that way of auto destruction. So some people like being uh, advocating for this change for many years. We don't need any push up, but it's true that the in general both citizens and corporations will react to better to incitative, so looking for benefits and and co-benefits and even profits out of something, or the coercive way of pushing by sanctions. Of course, it will be fantastic if we will all act by incitative, but it's not. So there needs a combination of both. It's a combination of a culture change and exactly the grassroots are pushing for that. Consult us, listen to us, and be aware of our needs. And on the other hand, you have the government pushing down with say, okay, you have to follow this legal frame, otherwise there will be some kind of actions. So for example, I was the chair of the Senatorial Committee on Natural Resources, Environment, and Energy while we were studying C69. So I was happy that the mining industry was full in support of this C69, which is the Impact Assessment Act. Of course, the legislatively process makes that the government proposes something, the House of Commons see it with its lenses, put some amendments, and that comes to the Senate, and we see it with other lenses, and at the end it comes. Sometimes it comes better for everybody, and sometimes it comes better for some groups and less for other groups. But what I can tell you is the impact assessment needs to be seen as a legislation that needs modernization, because there is no more evolution in the knowledge than in this particular area. So of course, looking at projects with social lenses is now important. And if you don't look at it with social lenses, your project won't go ahead. So better start consulting from the beginning and knowing what the community wants and needs from the beginning. Otherwise, you will invest 10%, up to 10% of your initial capital on doing this impact assessment, and you won't have the project. But the other lenses are the climate change lenses, and the other lenses are the cumulative impact, because now we are aware again with the progress and advance that we cannot consider just local impacts. When we are along a river, there is upstreams, there is downstreams, and there is multiple needs. When we need water for something, we have to take in consideration agriculture, hydro, drinking water. So it was just natural that we do that. And I was early talking with you before the chat about the B12, the climate change accountability. And it says in its preamble that climate change is a global problem that requires immediate address by the industry. So it's like, that's it, it's there. You have to take care of this now. So yeah, but the research, it has to go in parallel all the way along. And I talk about biolixiviation, but here in Quebec, we are having mountains of asbestos, asbestos, yes, asbestos. Um, and and after 30 years, the government is saying we cannot leave it like that, because the dust is going everywhere near the city of asbestos that just changed its name. So one of the avenues is recycling. and say, well, what can we do then? Because they are otherwise going into the river, going into the atmosphere. So research has to be coming all the way in parallel along with the development.
Yeah, that's a great point. I guess it's just as a final comment, and just after this, I'll just point out that there's a couple of questions that are streaming through our Q&A chat line, so I'll read those off to you. But I guess it's just as a final closing question to you both. And this is a very broad question, I guess, but how do you see mining, both not just here in Canada but abroad? How do you see that? How do you see mining evolving in light of the sort of ever increasing focus on sustainability? Stefan, I'll go to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish I knew, and I wish I could say with certainty, but we won't know until we know. But trends that we see is I think there will be a very strong drive towards carbon neutral economy and the reduction of specifically of the energy footprint of mines. Mines consume a lot of energy, and so ways to develop a more carbon neutral economy and reducing energy footprint, I think, will become very important. As the senator was saying, right? We realize our resources are finite, and we need to find a way to manage that. Mining companies have improved in leaps and bounds when it comes to closure, but I think an integrated way of planning closure, making sure it's part of design from the beginning for closure, that there are strong bonding mechanisms. Canada is really in a lead role there, and I think that will propagate around the globe. People are no longer accepting that somebody just walks away from a mine and leaves it untouched for the taxpayer to clean up. That's no longer happening. And I think human rights will be important, right? That touches many parts of the business. So as we want to be integrated on an environmental way, we want to be integrated on a human rights level, make sure that this whole supply chain respects human rights. We find now when we do due diligence work on mining projects, lenders and investors are really interested in the human rights aspect, and I think that's very important. And the money can drive a lot of these initiatives and support them. And improve governance around human rights, I think, will be quite helpful, because sometimes it's hard for a mining company that goes into an emerging market to make sure that human rights are respected on all levels of the supply chain. You need governance to help you out on that. So I think carbon neutral, energy footprint, closure planning, and human rights planning all along the supply chain. Those, I think, are a couple of things that are developing over the next while, and will become will be in the forefront of planning.
Right, and it's funny you mentioned that about the capital markets. I was reading in the Globe yesterday. I forget the name of the actual pension fund, but they're starting to put in benchmark requirements for ESG disclosure. So I guess sort of in parallel with what Rosa was saying about pressure from above, if there's that pressure from the capital markets to step up and improve their ESG performance, I could see that certainly playing a part. And Rosa, how do you see things developing, or rather, what would you like to see?
Well, I think there is no choice. There is only one path that it's been described by Stephen, and we have to take care of all these issues that have been mentioned. And as you rightly pointed out, is because the business in mining needs investments. And so when you have the investors putting some also conditionality for this investment, and with respect to the carbon neutral, with respect to efficiency in energy, with respect to remediation after the cycle of the mining, so there is no choice. So it's like in any other thing, it's managing risk. No, we have to manage the risk. So investors manage the risk, and the mines have to manage the risk. And I think that it will turn into a more fair distributions of both of the benefits and the risk. So every stakeholder has to proportionately take responsibility of some of the risk. And for example, with just the COVID thing, has stopped us from working. Yeah, we know in Alberta, some of the places where the workers are, there has been some contagion, important contagion. So there are new things, new risks that come and are added to the situation. And I just want to say that my office just published a white book on a green and a clean and fair recovery after pandemic COVID-19, and that maybe if I'll find the link, I will put it in the chat.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, thank you both, Rosa and Stefan. I have a couple of questions here that I'll shoot off. This is from Gabrielle Castillo, and the question is, what approach is, let me just read this off for a second. So what approach is the mining sector taking to consider climate change? And how is this contemplated at the land restoration stage? Do either of you want to take a crack at that?
I will let Stephen answer first.
Stefan?
I was just going to pass the buck to you. Sorry, sorry. I'm just taking notes here. It's stepped. How does mining take step to address climate change? Was the first part, and what was the second part, please?
And how is this contemplated at the land restoration stage? So I guess at the mine closure stage.
Okay. So climate change is considered early on in the EIA or ESIA or EA, sorry, impact assessment as it's called in Canada. This is an integrated part of planning. So mining companies for each project have to demonstrate that they number one, are designed to withstand any changing climate. So how will the tailings deal with changing climate in going forward? What if there's more rain events, less rain events? So that's in there. And then as well, for each project, companies need to come up with ways to reduce impacts on climate change. So that's an extremely integrated part of the impact assessment. And how is this contemplated at the closure? I'm not sure I can really answer this. All I can say is, again, in the same way, climate contribution is measured and planned in advance of a project in the impact assessment change. We consider closure as well. And often and clearly every mine is trying to restore the vegetation that was there before, so that then in the long term, there will be more sequestration potential available once the mine has moved on and has closed out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Stefan. I believe that's all of our questions. Oh no, I have one more. This one's from Alvaro Paredes. I'd appreciate hearing your thoughts about mining and Indigenous people's rights. In Canada, we have several conflicts in regards to natural resource projects happening in traditional territories. What's required to prevent these conflicts? Maybe Rosa, I'll pass that one on to you.
Yes, sure. So I think that in relationship with the previous question is that Canada is signatory of several international agreements and with respect to the Sustainable Development Goal. So we have more than a dozen Sustainable Development Goals that includes, the reconciliation with Indigenous people, that inclusive prosperity, and that, for example, also sustainable economy and the fight to climate change, protect the oceans, protect the rivers. And so if we say that we adhere to these, we have to put them in action. So and I think we are going to continue in that sense, because I don't see Indigenous people nowhere in the world stop claiming for their rights. It's in the opposite. So we have to take care of that. And it is true that lots or most of the mines encroach, overlap with the territories and the lands of indigenous people, not only in Canada, but in Latin America. In fact, when I talk in Latin America, I said that Canada and Peru and other Chile, Colombia, they have similar economies and similar society issues, because we have Canada is wide from ocean to ocean, but in Latin America, in South America, we have the Andes, which gave us again this distance and this access problems. And then we have in both indigenous people, and so we have to be very smart at not keeping this impact at the long term, and increasing frictions with the environment, and increasing frictions with indigenous people. So there is no way. We have to work on this, and we have to just not consult, but integrate the opinion and become partners in the development.
That's a great way of framing it, Rosa. Thanks very much.
Kurt, can I say a few things on
Absolutely,
this?
yeah.
Thanks for the question, Alvaro. I'm hoping that the new early planning phase that we have as part of the impact assessment will help prevent some of these conflicts, right? The early planning should allow for the company, for the regulators and other stakeholders in the indigenous communities to come to the table and put concerns, issues, and how the interaction will work together early on, and see if there's any common ground. So I really hope that this early planning stage will help. I think what we also need is strong government to find the right balance, right? It can't just all be about money, more money here, more money less. It has to be planning for the future and doing what's right to sustain the environment, both the environmental part and the human part. And so government needs to help in the process, drive it forward, and strike the right balance for the in our case the people of Canada. Obviously all of this should then help plan proper impact benefit agreements and find deals that are attractive for the proponent as well as the First Nations communities, the indigenous communities, and other stakeholders.
Well, that's
Thank you,
great.
Kurt.
Thanks, Stefan. I see we're pressed for time. I think I'll put out one more question, and this one's from Louis Gay. Do you see a future for nature-based solutions for some of the challenges the mining sector is facing? It's funny because just on the radio, I've started hearing commercials for Shell Oil talking about their nature-based solutions in terms of reforestation. Stefan, how do you see that factoring into how the mining sector deals with sustainability?
I'm not sure I understand what a nature-based solution would.
It seems to be a term coined by the oil and gas industry in respect of land restoration. So reforestation would be a prime example.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm very biased. I've only ever worked in mining, but mining has always done this, right? Mining is one of the few industries that's held from the beginning to close up, the sites and pay for it and revegetate. So yeah, I'm all for, and I think industry is all for, progressive reclamation and reducing the impacts at closure. It's in the interest of the mining company, because the sooner you've reforested and reestablished the site, the sooner you can stop spending money. So I think there's a lot of drive to help nature restore your site and use it to your advantage. Mining companies do a lot of things during the operations phase, testing of what material will grow, what covers on the tailings work, what is long-term behavior of the tailings, how can we make sure that things remain physically and chemically stable, and nature can help us a lot, right? There's wetlands you can establish downstream of the tailings to filter out and take up any of the metals. These things I think are very important.
And I'm sure there'll be lots of research and development that'll come, will need to come down the line to address those issues. And actually, one of the last questions that I'll put out there, I'll frame it more in the form of a comment than a question from Paula Fisher, who was commenting that Canada has many agreements, funding agreements with environmental research and capacity building in countries, or with countries like Mexico and Brazil. And she comments that Peru, being such a significant partner with Canada, doesn't have similar projects. So perhaps leave it at that as maybe a call to those on the call and those in the industry to perhaps create more of those partnerships, not just within Canada, but with our neighboring countries as well. Well, thank you both, Stefan and Rosa, for your time, and to all of you as well. I'll pass the floor back over to Arturo.
Thank you, Kurt. Rosa, Stefan, it has been incredible, the knowledge and experience that you have shared with us today. It's just remarkable. Kurt, amazing the way you were able to conduct this webinar. Definitely you are a master of ceremony by nature. On behalf of the whole, also I want to thank everybody in the audience, all the attendants for joining us today in this webinar. And we invite you to join us and follow us on LinkedIn and on Facebook for our future events, and also for you to participate with the Chamber and make this Peruvian Canadian community bigger and better. After that, really many thanks to everybody. And with this, I conclude this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All of you, please join us in the other webinar, and all the PCC team that are attending today, please join us in the other link. Thank you so much, guys. See you in a bit.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.